Hello, everyone, and welcome to Harp History with Haley. Today we're going to cover the classical era, and if you're curious, I do have a video on the Baroque era you can watch. We typically call all orchestral music classical music, but we do have a classical era that began around 1730 and ended 1820. Baroque music was very complex because the composer was trying to make the orchestra sound full. So even though music is progressing, classical music is less complex structurally and texturally. However, the orchestra is getting bigger, and the harpsichord was replaced by the piano. So instruments are getting louder and stronger, and so is the orchestra. So if the harpsichord evolved and we have the piano now, what was going on with the harp? I did mention the Welsh triple-strung harp because that is what the Handel Harp Concerto was originally performed on. But there were a lot of harp inventions happening in the 1700s. I'm going to try and keep it simple here and just name some of the big ones in this video. In 1720, there was the Hochberger 7-pedal single-action harp. This means that the string's pitch could only be changed by a half step. Then there was the 14-pedal harp by Cousineau in 1782, which was an effort to change the string's pitch by a whole step. And then in 1810, we had the biggest advancement for the harp made by Erard with the double-action pedal harp, which is what we still play today, just a larger, stronger version. So this is all happening pretty much within the classical era. Interestingly, even though one of the biggest advancements was made with the double action pedal harp, the single action pedal harp was still preferred for a long time, and this had to do with Noderman. He was the first harp professor at the Paris Conservatoire, and he also had his own harp manufacturing company that made single action pedal harps. So Noderman continued to only teach the single action pedal harp, obviously because these new Erard harps were his competition. Now, what was the role of the harp in the classical era? Well, we don't see it emerge as an official member of the orchestra until the mid-1800s. So let's talk about some of the solo harp repertoire during this time. A big one is CPE Bach's Sonata in G major, because most classical musicians have actually heard of this composer. CPE Bach was the son of J.S. Bach, and this piece was written during a transition time between Baroque and classical music. So you can definitely hear a little bit of both in this piece. Fun fact, this piece is actually considered to be the first piece written for the pedal harp, albeit the single action pedal harp. Another good one to note is Sophia Dussek's Sonata in C minor. This piece is commonly played, and it's interesting because this piece was for a long time misattributed to being composed by her husband. While both of them composed for the harp, Sophia was actually a harpist herself, and so you can definitely hear the stylistic differences between the two composers. So we all know Mozart, and surprise, he wrote for the harp. Only one harp piece, but we'll take it. While the harp was not a true member of the orchestra, we still have quite a few concerti that were written for the harp during the classical era, one of them being the Flute and Harp Double Concerto. This piece is pretty cool because it's one of two double concerti that Mozart wrote. This piece was commissioned by a duke who was also a flutist, and his daughter who was a harpist and was taking composition lessons with Mozart. And story has it that the Duke never paid the commission fee, and we are unsure of its early performances. The most common thing you'll hear about this piece from harpists is it seems to be an adaptation of a piano score, which can make harpists a little grumpy sometimes. Two of my other favorite classical harp pieces are sonatas by Parry and Paschetti. Parry was a blind harpist who played a Welsh triple-strung harp, but his sonata in G major is still well suited for the modern pedal harp. Paschetti was an organist, and although his sonata in C minor is beautiful on the harp, we actually play a transcription by Salzedo, who was a 20th century harpist. So that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed learning about harp literature in the classical era.